The gold envelope trembled in Amara Daniel's hand. Not because she was nervous. Not because she was afraid. But because she had just read the name printed on the guest list for the Lantern Foundation Gala, the biggest night of her career, and it was a name she had spent an entire year trying to forget. Ethan Brooks. Her ex-husband. The man who once looked at her like she was the only woman in the world, and then, 3 children later, looked at her like she was invisible. He was coming tonight. To the very event she had built with her own 2 hands. And Amara had exactly 6 hours to decide whether she would let that name shake the woman she had fought so hard to become. If you're new here, kindly like, subscribe, and comment. And stay with us through this story. 3 years earlier, nobody in Brighton Hills would have believed that Ethan Brooks could ever stop loving his wife. They were the golden couple. The real estate mogul and his beautiful, warm-hearted wife who could turn any house into a home with nothing but fabric swatches and good instincts. At every dinner party, every barbecue, every church function, Ethan would pull Amara close and tell anyone who'd listen, "This woman right here. She's the reason I get out of bed every morning." He had cried, actually cried, the day their first daughter, Lily, was born. He held Amara's hand through 2 more pregnancies, whispering into her ear in the delivery room, "You're doing this for us. I see you. I'll always see you." They built a 5-bedroom home in the hills with a wraparound porch Amara designed herself. They built a family, Lily, then Noah, then baby Caleb. They built, or so Amara believed, a forever. But forever has a strange way of quietly cracking before anyone notices the sound. It started small. It always does. After Caleb was born, Amara's body changed the way bodies do after carrying and nursing 3 children. She was exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix, up at 2 a.m. with a colicky newborn, up again at 6 a.m. to get Lily and Noah ready for school, running her design business from a laptop balanced on her knees while a baby slept on her chest. One night, standing in the kitchen in her pajamas, hair unwashed for 3 days, Ethan walked in from a business trip, looked her over, and said with a small laugh, "Damn. You've really let yourself go, huh?" Amara laughed too. Because that's what you do when you love someone and you're too tired to fight. "I just had your son 5 months ago, Ethan. I'm just joking, babe. Relax." He kissed her forehead and walked past her to the fridge. She told herself it was nothing. A tired joke from a tired husband. She told herself that 100 more times over the following months, every time a comment landed a little harder than the last. "You used to take care of yourself. You should see what Marcus's wife looks like now, she got a personal trainer." "I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying maybe try harder." Each comment was small enough to laugh off. But small cuts, one after another, in the same place, eventually become a wound that never closes. By the time Caleb turned 1, Ethan had stopped inviting Amara to his business dinners. "It's just work stuff, babe. You'd be bored," he told her, straightening his tie in the mirror. "I used to come to all of these," Amara said quietly from the bed, Caleb asleep in her arms. "Things change." He didn't even turn around when he said it. Amara sat in that empty house 4 nights a week, feeding a baby, helping Lily with homework, listening to Noah practice spelling words, and wondering, quietly, painfully, what exactly had changed. And more than that, what was wrong with her that it had. She began avoiding mirrors. She began flinching at photographs. She began apologizing for things that needed no apology, for being tired, for asking for help, for existing in a body that had grown 3 human beings and somehow, in her husband's eyes, had become a problem to be fixed. She had no idea the worst was still coming. It was a Tuesday. Amara remembered because Tuesday was poster night, and she had just set Caleb in his high chair when Ethan walked through the door 2 hours early, still in his suit, his face unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. Amara's stomach dropped the way it does when a person already knows, somewhere deep down, exactly what's coming. Let me get the kids settled, now, Amara. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and followed him into the living room, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Ethan didn't sit. He stood by the window with his hands in his pockets, staring out at the street like it held more comfort than his own wife did. "I've been seeing someone," he said. The room tilted. "What?" "Her name is Vanessa. I met her at the Siemens account launch. It's been going on for a few months." Amara's hands went cold. "I didn't plan it, Amara. It just happened." "Ethan, we have 3 children." "I know that." For the first time, something like guilt flickered across his face, but it didn't stay long. "But I'm not happy. I haven't been happy in a long time." "You never said anything, what was I supposed to say?" His voice rose, sharp and cold. "That I don't feel the same way about you anymore. That every time I look at you, I don't see the woman I married." Amara felt her whole body go numb. "Say it, then. Say what you mean." Ethan exhaled, and then, in the flattest voice she had ever heard from him, he said the words that would replay in her mind for the next year of her life. "I'm not attracted to you anymore, Amara. I haven't been for a long time. I'm sorry, but that's the truth." Silence swallowed the room whole. Somewhere in the kitchen, Caleb began to fuss in his high chair. Amara could hear it, distantly, like it was happening in another house, to another woman. "Get out," she finally whispered. "Amara. Get out." He did. That same night, Ethan Brooks packed 2 suitcases, kissed his children on their heads while they slept, and walked out of the only home his family had ever known. Amara stood on the porch she had designed with her own hands and watched his taillights disappear down the street. And then she went back inside, picked up her crying son, and did the only thing a mother can do in the middle of the worst night of her life. She kept going. Grief has a strange schedule. It doesn't ask permission. It comes at 3 a.m. while folding laundry. It comes in the cereal aisle when you reach for the brand your husband used to like. It comes every single time you catch your own reflection and no longer recognize the woman staring back. For the first month, Amara barely functioned. She dropped Lily and Noah at school with a smile plastered on her face and came home to cry into a couch cushion so the children wouldn't hear. She stopped answering client emails. Contracts she'd been chasing for months went cold. Her business, once thriving, began to quietly wither, the same way she was. She avoided mirrors entirely. She wore the same 3 oversized sweaters on rotation. She stopped going to the gatherings she used to love, because every "how are you holding up, sweetie," felt like a knife dressed up as kindness. One evening, after putting all 3 children to bed, Amara sat on her bathroom floor, back against the tub, and let herself finally ask the question she'd been avoiding for weeks. Was I not enough? She thought of every sacrifice, the business opportunities she'd turned down to be home for bedtime, the sleep she'd lost, the body she'd given to bring 3 lives into the world. She thought of every harmless joke, every skipped invitation, every silence where love used to be. And for the first time, sitting on that cold tile floor, Amara Daniels cried until she had nothing left. That was the night her Aunt Miriam let herself in with her spare key, found her niece curled up on the bathroom floor, and didn't say a single word. She just sat down beside her, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and held her the way she had when Amara was a little girl who'd scraped her knee. When Amara finally caught her breath, Aunt Miriam spoke, calm and steady. "You've been asking yourself the wrong question, baby." "What do you mean?" "You keep asking, was I not enough?" That's Ethan's question. That was never yours to carry. Aunt Miriam took Amara's face gently in both hands. "The question you should be asking is this: before you were his wife, before you were anybody's mother, who were you?" Amara opened her mouth, and nothing came out. She genuinely didn't know. "That's what I thought," Aunt Miriam said softly. "So maybe it's time you found out again." Amara didn't transform overnight. There was no single dramatic scene, no movie montage that fixed everything in an instant. It was slower than that. Messy. Realer. It started with a walk. Just one, around the block, pushing Caleb in his stroller at 6 in the morning before the kids woke for school. The next day, she walked a little farther. The day after that, farther still. It started with saying no to the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like Ethan's, the one that said her body wasn't good enough, that she'd let herself go, that she was somehow less than. It started with cooking real meals again, not just to feed her children, but to remind herself she deserved nourishment too. It started with pulling out her old sketchbooks, the ones filled with interior design concepts she'd shelved years ago, to focus on the family, and letting herself dream again. 3 months in, she reopened her design business with a single client, a small boutique hotel downtown that needed a lobby refresh. She poured everything into it, every color, every texture, every late night. When the owner walked through the finished space and gasped, "Amara, this is stunning," something cracked open in her chest that had been sealed shut for a year. She remembered. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. Word spread. 1 client became 3. 3 became 10. Within 8 months, Amara Daniels' design had a waitlist longer than it had ever had, even before the divorce. But the real transformation wasn't in her body, though yes, the long walks and home-cooked meals and returning joy did change her physically over time. The real transformation was quieter than that. It was in the way she started speaking to herself. It was in the way she stopped shrinking in photographs. It was in the way she laughed, really laughed, with Lily and Noah and baby Caleb, filling the house with a sound it hadn't heard in far too long. She joined a small business leadership circle. She reconnected with college friends she'd let go of during the marriage. She started attending Sunday service again, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to. One evening, nearly a year after Ethan walked out, Amara stood in front of her bathroom mirror, really stood there, for the first time in months, and looked at the woman staring back. She didn't look at her the way Ethan once had. She looked at her the way Aunt Miriam had. The way her children looked at her every single day. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Amara smiled at her own reflection. While Amara was quietly rebuilding, Ethan Brooks was learning a very different lesson. Vanessa Cole was 28, radiant, and exactly the kind of woman Ethan had convinced himself he deserved, young, glamorous, always camera-ready, with a lifestyle built on brand deals and beach vacations. For the first few months after he left Amara, Ethan felt like a man who'd finally traded up. He took Vanessa to Cabo. He bought her a designer bag for her birthday that cost more than Amara's entire maternity wardrobe combined. He posted photos. He felt, briefly, like the man he'd always imagined himself to be. But glamour, Ethan would learn, is expensive to maintain, and it doesn't ask if you can afford it. His real estate firm had been quietly struggling for over a year, something he'd hidden from Amara during the marriage out of pride. 2 major deals fell through in the same quarter. Investors who once trusted his judgment started asking harder questions. The lifestyle he was funding for Vanessa, the vacations, the gifts, the new penthouse he'd leased to impress her, was bleeding him dry. "Babe, we are still doing Tulum next month, right?" Vanessa asked one evening, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "Things are a little tight right now," Ethan admitted. "I might need to push it." Vanessa's expression shifted immediately. "Tight? Ethan, you told me you were, like, one of the top brokers in the city." "I am. Was. It's complicated right now. It's always complicated with you lately." She stood, grabbing her bag. "I didn't sign up to date a guy who can't even book a trip." The relationship that had once felt like validation began revealing itself for what it truly was, never about him at all. Within a few weeks, Vanessa stopped answering his calls as quickly. Within 2 months, she'd moved on entirely, posting new vacation photos with a different man on a beach Ethan had once promised to take her to. Alone in his half-furnished penthouse, surrounded by the trophies of a life he thought he wanted, Ethan finally had nothing left to distract him from the truth. He had left a woman who loved him fiercely, who had given him 3 children and a home built with her bare hands and her whole heart, for the fantasy of being wanted by someone who never truly saw him at all. He thought of Amara constantly. Not the version of her he'd criticized in those final years, but the real Amara, the one who used to leave notes in his briefcase before big meetings, who remembered his mother's birthday every year without being asked, who had held his hand through childbirth 3 times and never once made him feel like anything less than the love of her life. He had thrown all of that away for a mirage. And by the time he realized it, he had absolutely no idea if there was anything left to go back to. The invitation for the Lantern Foundation Gala arrived on his desk on a Thursday, sent by a business associate who'd invited him as a +1 months earlier, long before Ethan knew who was designing the event. He almost didn't go. But something, pride, curiosity, a wound that had never fully healed, made him put on his best suit that Saturday night and walk through the doors of the city's grandest ballroom, transformed into something out of a dream, soft golden lighting, cascading floral installations, a color palette so intentional and elegant it felt like walking into a painting. Whoever designed this place has incredible taste, the man beside him murmured, looking around in awe. Ethan barely heard him. His eyes had already found her. Across the ballroom, dressed in deep emerald, her hair swept back, laughing warmly with a cluster of donors, stood Amara. Not the exhausted, apologetic woman he'd left standing in their living room a year ago. This Amara stood taller. She moved through the room like she owned every inch of it, because, in every way that mattered, she did. She wasn't thinner in some dramatic, unrecognizable way. She simply glowed with something Ethan hadn't seen in her in years. Peace. Confidence. Joy that had nothing to do with him. Ethan's chest tightened. He felt, for the first time in his adult life, genuinely intimidated by his own ex-wife. He watched her thank the event coordinator, watched a photographer ask to capture the visionary behind tonight's design, watched Amara laugh, really laugh, head tilted back, easy and unguarded, at something a friend whispered in her ear. He hadn't heard that laugh directed at him in years. He wasn't sure he deserved to hear it now. For nearly 20 minutes, Ethan stood frozen near the bar, gripping a glass of champagne he never drank, working up the courage to do something he suddenly wasn't sure he had any right to do. Eventually, their eyes met across the room. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She simply held his gaze for a long moment, steady, unbothered, before excusing herself from her conversation and walking toward him. Every step she took felt, to Ethan, like a verdict being delivered. "Ethan," she said when she reached him. "Calm. Composed. Not a trace of the woman who used to shrink when he entered a room. "Amara. You look," he stopped himself, searching for a word that wouldn't sound hollow. "This whole event. It's incredible. You did this." "I did." A small, genuine smile. "I've been designing full-time again. This is the biggest project I've taken on. It shows." He hesitated. "You look happy." "I am." She said it simply, without cruelty, without triumph. Just fact. Silence settled between them, not the sharp, painful silence of their final night together, but something quieter. Ethan looked down at his glass, then back up at her, and finally let the words tumble out, the ones he'd rehearsed 100 times in his head and never once believed he'd have the chance to say. "I need to say something, and I understand if you don't want to hear it." Amara said nothing, but she didn't walk away either. She waited. "I was cruel to you," Ethan said, his voice lower now, stripped of the polish he usually wore like armor. "I said things no husband should ever say to the mother of his children. I made you feel like you weren't enough, when the truth is, I was the one who wasn't enough, for you, for our kids, for the life we built." I confused beauty with worth. I thought I wanted something new and exciting, and I threw away something real to chase it. I was wrong, Amara. About all of it. Amara listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable, and when he finished, she let out a slow breath. Thank you for saying that, she said finally. I mean that. Is there? Ethan swallowed hard. Is there any chance, someday, we could? No, Ethan. The word landed gently, but firmly. Fine now. I forgave you, she continued, a long time ago. Not for you. For me. I couldn't keep carrying the weight of what you did and still become who I am tonight. So yes, I forgive you. She paused. But forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. I spent years believing I wasn't enough because I listened to your voice instead of my own. I'm not walking back into that. I won't live that way again. Ethan's eyes glistened, and for once, he didn't try to hide it. I understand. We'll always be Lily, Noah, and Caleb's parents, Amara said, her tone softening. I want you present in their lives. I want you to be better for them. That door is open. But the door to us, Ethan, that one's closed. And I'm at peace with that. He nodded slowly, something between grief and relief settling over his face. You deserve everything good, Amara. I mean that. I hope you know that now. I do know it, she said, and for the first time all evening, her smile reached her eyes completely. That's the difference a year makes. Later that night, as the gala reached its final moments, the foundation's director took the stage to honor the evening's standout contributor. Every year, we recognize someone whose work goes beyond talent, someone whose heart shows up in every detail, the director announced. This year, that person transformed not just a room, but an entire experience, all while rebuilding her business and her life from the ground up. Please join me in celebrating our Community Impact Award winner, Amara Daniels. The room erupted in applause. Amara walked to the stage in her emerald gown, poised and radiant, as Lily, Noah, and baby Caleb, who Aunt Miriam had proudly brought for this very moment, cheered loudly from a table near the front, jumping in their seats with pride. And near the back of the ballroom, Ethan Brooks stood among the crowd, clapping along with everyone else, watching the woman he once failed to see clearly finally being seen by an entire room full of people. He understood now, far too late for it to change anything between them, but perhaps not too late to change himself. The beauty he had spent years failing to recognize in his own wife had never been about a mirror at all. It had always been in her strength. Her resilience. The quiet, unbreakable love she poured into everyone around her, even when no one poured it back. Amara stood beneath the golden lights, accepted her award with grace, and looked out at her 3 children cheering her name. She didn't need Ethan's apology to feel whole. She didn't need his regret to validate her journey. She had already given herself the one thing he never could, the certainty that her worth was never his to define in the first place. As the applause continued, Amara smiled, not for the audience, not for Ethan, but for herself, and stepped forward into the next chapter of a life she had built, entirely, on her own terms. If this story touched you, don't scroll past without hitting that like button. Subscribe to @African_mystery_story so you never miss a story like this one, and drop a comment below, tell us what part hit you the hardest. We read every single one. See you in the next story.